I'm Dr. Craig Escude, the host of IDD Health Matters, a podcast where we talk about health, wellness, and health equity for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Hope you enjoy it. Hello, and welcome to this episode of IDD Health Matters. My guest today is Tanya Richmond. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you, Craig.
So, Tanya, I know you do a lot of work in the person-centered thinking, person-centered services world. Would you tell us about what you do?
Yes. I am, by background, I'm a social worker, but I'm a consultant also in person-centered practices. So I help organizations generally who want to implement person-centered practices, write plans, write policies, and just generally help the people that they serve and support have better lives through the use of person-centered practices.
So so everybody, we're all on the same page. Person-centered practices, what does that mean?
For me, very simply, it means that we get to know who people are at their core, learn what's important to them, and despite the presence of maybe a disability or vulnerability of some sort, we help them live lives that are in balance between what matters most to them and what they need to be healthy and safe.
And, you know, I might say sometimes when we think about health, sometimes we're maybe a little more on the, hey, this is what's important for you, and not always taking into account what maybe the person wants for their lives. And so what you're saying is a way to help supporters, people who work with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or those that are aging, or really anyone with any vulnerabilities, be able to work together to balance what the person wants for their lives.
That's right.
With what they need.
That's right. Yeah, and it's natural,
Yeah.
I think, for anyone in a support role to focus on those things that are keeping the person healthy and safe, because it's kind of what we're in the world to do,
Mm-hmm.
but we can very quickly lose sight of those things that matter most to the person and keep them satisfied.
So is this just a concept where we say, hey, I think, I'm going to think about the person. What do they want? So what do you want, Tanya? Let's include that in the plan. Or is it more than that?
I think it's a lot more than that. In fact,
that was a leading question.
Maybe, it might
Yeah.
be the worst way to learn what's important to someone. I think there are opportunities in every conversation and in every interaction to learn what matters to people. And we have to listen a little differently maybe than we have historically done in our fields. But we want to listen for what kind of sits at the core of that person and what gives them a sense of purpose and meaning and satisfaction. And so simply asking someone what's important to them, if I ask you what's important to you, you're going to give me a list of 5 or 10 things. I'm going to give you that same list, and it won't sound very different. But when I have a conversation and get to know you, it's going to be very nuanced. And if I'm listening in a person-centered way, I'll certainly have much more information to understand that balance from your perspective.
That makes a lot of sense. And besides just having a conversation, there are actual kind of techniques, like skills, that you can use to help determine or help a person even determine what's really important to them and be able to express that, right?
Yes, there's about a dozen skills that are based on the balance of important to and important for, the thing that you mentioned earlier. That first concept, important to, important for, is just foundational to using any of the skills. It really doesn't matter if the person can tell us with their words or not. We can use our person-centered skills to be present with them in such a way that helps us understand through their behavior, through the people who know them best, and really just including a variety of sources of information to get that complete picture.
You said something that I've been asked before. Well, if a person can't talk to you, how can you learn what they want for their lives?
Yeah, I think people often say that, and I usually just come back with, well, do you live with anyone else? Because do you know sometimes that the person that you live with is communicating very clearly something that's important to them, and they haven't said a word to you about what it is. But I think more than that, any of us who've worked in support roles can really tell when the person that we're supporting, if we know that person and care about them, we can tell when something maybe is on their mind, or something's bothering them, or something really excites them, simply by the things they're doing, the tone of their voice, the set of their shoulders, the look on their face. And they don't have to say a word for us to have a deeper understanding if we know them well. And that's what our person-centered skills are really designed to do, is get to know the person more deeply.
And when you say skills, can you describe one or two skills that can give the audience an understanding of how these things work?
Yes. So the skills are categorized into kind of three major groups. And the first group, and the one that I think most people, if they're in support roles, find helpful, are called discovery and listening skills. And it's skills like learning about a person's day. So we might ask, what makes for a good day? We might ask what makes for a bad day. And usually you don't want just good or bad. You want to say, what's typical, and then what makes that day a little bit better and what makes that a little bit worse. So we call that the good day, bad day skill. And it works pretty much. Yeah, it works pretty much like the title. Then we have skills about routines and rituals. We tend to teach that skill through talking about a person's morning routine, but it really could be any cultural ritual. It could be any routine throughout their day or week that gives them a sense of control and movement toward those things that matter most. And that's what we're all trying to do in our lives, is sort of move in the direction of the things that give us a sense of being in control. Like if you've ever had a bad day because your morning didn't go well, you absolutely know the feeling of how much a routine can impact the rest of your day.
That makes perfect sense. So how did you get into this field? How did you get into doing what you do?
I started my career in aging. So I started working with older adults. And back then, it's been more than 30 years now, we had a model called it was the greenhouse model. That was, it morphed into something else, which was a person-centered adjacent type of model, which now I think is considered to be a pretty person-centered model. And so as time went by, I ended up in a university setting. I ended up doing a lot of work still with older adults, but finding myself really looking for ways to connect that were not focused on what the system wanted for older adults, but to really help people have lives that they were describing, that they were missing, really. Yeah. And I met Michael Small through work in North Carolina with the Division of Aging. He was training people to be person-centered thinking trainers through a systems change initiative. And we actually started using person-centered practices in nursing homes, which wasn't being done anywhere. And so I became a trainer, and from there I just kind of got deeper and deeper into the field, became a consultant, started working with Michael. Michael's now retired. And my partner and I have now taken over the company that we joined him in.
And the company is?
Support Development Associates.
And how can people find out more about that company? If they need to?
Support Development Associates is at sdaus.com. And certainly anything related to the learning community for person-centered practices, you'll see us there too.
Well, I want to talk about some partnerships that we have, because I know that we've had the pleasure to work with you guys in developing some e-learning courses and some other training. You guys have credentialed our trainers, right, yes, to be able to do this. So we are on the cusp, and probably by the time this podcast episode comes out, we'll have them available, if not, or right there, but on new ways to train in person-centered thinking. So I know that for many years this was done in person, right? You had to attend, I believe it's a 3-day, it was a 2-day or 3-day? Yeah, 3-day then 2-day course. And then we had some minor thing called COVID that happened, and people had to transition the way they trained for anything to more online and virtual. So that kind of facilitated movement into a virtual training, right? Yes. And then, we do a lot more now through e-learning, and Intellectability does a lot of e-learning courses and course development. So we began to develop some e-learning courses in conjunction with SDA to teach some of the foundational principles. And then now the exciting thing is that we're getting to a full e-learn version of the full course, the full training course, where you will get the certificate, right?
That's right. Yes.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah. You have really talented trainers, first of all, and you have a talented staff, and being able to take those person-centered concepts and making them engaging in the e-learning environment. And I've seen a ton of e-learning over, especially the last 5 years. Everybody's kind of rushing to develop things in this field in an electronic way. But this seems so engaging and so in the spirit of what we want people to experience in our person-centered classes. And so I think that this has that same feel to me when I sit through it. I want to see what happens next. I want to answer the questions. And
that's great to hear, because that's the idea that we were going for, is to make it be very interactive, that where you still learn the concepts, have to participate in it. It's not just sitting there watching a video, right?
Yeah, you can't just let it wash over you.
You can't do that. So we're going to have that course available. I'm not going to give a date because we don't know exactly, but very soon. Yeah. And it's the other exciting part of it is it's going to be available in 2 different versions. So, as most of you know, we at Intellectability focus mostly on people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and developing tools and training for supporters of people with IDD to be able to recognize health risks and to support people in person-centered ways. But we have had requests for a course on person-centered training for supporters of those who are aging.
Yeah.
So this will be the first time we'll be able to offer that course, and that will be available soon. So we're going to have an IDD version, and we're going to have an aging version, and you've played an instrumental role in both of those, but certainly in the aging version, because that's really your background, as you explained, right?
Yes, it is. And I'm also a death doula. I work a lot still with older adults, and even though I'm a consultant, I've stayed in the field this entire time because I just really enjoy working with older adults. And I can't imagine any other practices to use than person-centered practices. I mean, I can't imagine doing my job any other way. But I think the field is really hungry for aging content. Even though so many people are working with older adults, there just isn't that wealth of quality training out there for people to take. And I think that this is going to make a big difference for a lot of providers.
So who would you say should take this training?
I think anybody who's supporting older adults, so it could be someone who's professionally supporting older adults, maybe nursing home workers, people in the community who are maybe using services and supports. Their providers should be taking it, the direct service providers of those providers. I think families actually could gain a lot from it.
I was going to ask you that. In both families of people with IDD and those that are aging, that families could probably gain some insight.
Yeah, absolutely, they will. The way the stories are written in this training, I think families will connect to it very automatically. You mentioned IDD and aging. I think there's just now a recognition that people with IDD are aging alongside the rest of us. They're living longer.
You're right.
And I think that that we haven't kept up in the field really with the kind of training that supports the supporters to know what they need to know. And aging with IDD, the complexity of that is that people may already have communication challenges. They may already have some health concerns, and aging on top of that adds another layer that can feel especially challenging, I think, for caregivers. And I'm interested in that because I don't want caregivers to burn out. I want them to feel confident.
You're reading my mind. I was going to talk about caregiver burnout, and we see it in professional caregivers that are paid, but what they typically do will burn out and leave the field and go find something else,
right,
which is one of the reasons there's a lot of turnover. But if it's your son or your daughter or your mother or your dad, you can't just leave the field.
Right.
So having training that can help you provide supports in the best way possible empowers trainers and makes them feel more confident and can help with burnout or reduce that burnout.
Absolutely.
Right?
It helps people feel much more confident that they know what to do. So, and the skills I mentioned earlier, we have the everyday learning skills, but we also have skills that are really around matching people together and managing our roles in their lives. Those can be really helpful, not just for paid caregivers, but for natural supports in a person's life. And we have skills that as we work with people on a daily basis, we call them everyday learning skills. So every time we interact, we have the opportunity to refine our ability to understand how to support the person better.
I'm sitting here thinking some of these skills actually are probably good for parents.
Yes.
As kids get older, maybe we want to hold on too tight.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's like, well, how can we empower the person as they move through life in a healthy and supportive way? and also feel good about doing that, on my end. So this is really almost for anybody.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
Well, and kind of two trends in person-centered practices. One is really about people using services and supports actually contributing to writing or leading their plans more than we've ever done in the past. And while that's not perfect yet, I think we're getting more savvy about how to include people meaningfully so that they are more in the driver's seat there. So that can help parents when they see their child is capable, their adult child is capable of directing their life. So that's part of it. And then I also think that we really have to pay attention to outcomes. We've talked about outcomes that are measurable certainly for my entire career, but we haven't necessarily ever honed in on outcomes that are as person-centered as I'm starting to see. I'm starting to see some energy around that. I'd like to see more outcomes be about process and about people's satisfaction with their life, rather than just the things that we can.
And that's interesting because we're seeing a lot more talk about value-based payments, where providers and hospitals and whomever are being incentivized basically to provide good care, to provide care that's of value. So they get paid based on the value of the care. And some of those measures look at patient satisfaction and outcomes of the person and how does the person feel that's being supported.
Yeah.
So it ties into it in that way as well.
Absolutely.
I'm Dr. Craig Escudé, President of Intellectability. State developmental disability agencies, managed care organizations, and providers across the United States use Intellectability's health risk screening tool, e-learn courses, and person-centered training to improve health equity for people with IDD. Visit replacingrisk.com to learn more about how you can employ these tools with people you support. So Tanya, I always ask guests to tell us 3 things, 3 tips, 3 words of wisdom, 3 pieces of advice that you think can improve supports and services or improve the world at large for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And in this case, we can talk about people for those that are aging as well too. So what tips do you have for everyone?
So these may not be earth-shattering, but to me, I think listening first. Listening first is really about getting to know who the person is first and learning what's important to them before we decide what's wrong with them. So that would be my first one. I think supporting strengths, always trying to understand what the person can do before we jump into help or think about what they can't do.
I love that, yeah.
And then my third one would be, we are human beings and we're meant to be in community with one another. So anything about just including people. So having people where life is happening is very important. So I would say supporting belonging and inclusion is huge. We all deserve to belong.
Those are 3 wonderful things. Tanya, thank you for spending the time with me today, but more importantly for the incredible work that you are doing in this field and the lives that you're touching, and for the partnership that we have together.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate that.
The IDD Health Matters podcast is a production of Intellectability. Learn more about our health risk reduction tools and training for supporters of people with IDD by visiting replacingrisk.com.